Hello strangers and story lovers, and welcome to my lair. So today I was thinking of doing something a little bit different. Although I'm absolutely not reinventing the wheel, this is something I know that a lot of YouTubers do. But yeah, I just wanted to, instead of doing one deep dive on one specific book, I would just kind of go through all of the books I've read in a month. Just to see how it goes, really, see if I like it, if anyone else likes it, if it's a good time or not really. So yeah, might keep doing that, might not, depends on how much fun I end up having with it. So this is going to be the video for the month of May, obviously, because June is not over, and I know I'm not super on time, but I work a full-time job on top of this, so, you know, I do what I can. But yeah, anyway, let's start this. The first book that I want to talk about is probably going to be relatively quick because I do plan on releasing a video specifically about it later. I have no idea when, probably in a couple months. And it's Fourth Wing, because I've heard so much about it, mostly bad. But I do have a friend who read it and really enjoyed it, but did warn me that it was nothing special. So I ended up reading it to kind of make up my own mind, but also just, you know, sometimes it's funny to jump into a book thinking you're not necessarily going to have the best of time, but sometimes you just want to not hate read something, but just kind of read something that you know is not going to blow your mind in any way. You're probably going to rage a little bit, but sometimes it's fun. And mostly I find that it's a good way of, you know, learning about things. Kind of trying to spot where I personally have issues with the book compared to what other people have issues, see if we agree, see if we disagree, and just kind of make up my own mind on where I think issues potentially are, or if I even see any issue. So yeah, I guess you could kind of call it a thought experiment that I decided to pick up this saga. And I will probably read the other ones, Iron Flame and Onyx Storm, even though I didn't really enjoy Fourth Wing so much. But it was not as bad as I thought. I really kind of assumed going in that I would just completely hate it. But at the end of the day, I didn't. I ended up agreeing with some of the problems that I've seen. I don't think the characters were particularly compelling, but I can't say there was any characters that I hated. The main character, Violet Sorrengail, I probably would have loved her when I was a teenager. She's just she's this meek character who's just really weak physically and everything, but then she has to have like this big personality to compensate, and she's kind of described as being very smart and being kind of, you know, violent, because that is the nickname her love interest gives her, which some people like it, and I am team this is so cringe, but to each their own. I didn't find her particularly clever, and I didn't find her particularly violent either. I've seen better portrayed cases of both type of characters, so I wasn't super impressed with her, but she never pissed me off beyond belief. I also know that some people kind of consider her a bit of a Mary Sue because, spoilers, she ends up having 2 dragons when everyone else only has 1, and one of them is the most special ever, and she also has one of the most special power, blah blah blah. Personally, I don't really consider her a Mary Sue, but I will probably someday do a video specifically on Mary Sues and my thoughts on them. For me, she's just like a special girl, and I'm just a bit like, well, main characters in stories are allowed to be like the most special character in the world. To me, that doesn't make them a Mary Sue, that makes them, yeah, special girl or special boy or special individual. To me, I draw the line for a Mary Sue as does the universe bend over backward for them. In the case of Violet, I say debatable, but anyway, Her love interest was okay, although he did get on my nerves, but again, we'll talk about this probably in a different video in a month or 5. I found the writing so cringe. Like, I hate saying this because, well, I mean, when you write a book, you put so much thought and effort into it, otherwise it's impossible to complete that task. But yeah, I just felt... It felt like reading some fan fictions that I read when I was a teenager, and not the good ones, you know, like I'm not gonna criticize fan fictions, there are some really good ones out there, there are also some really bad ones, and this writing gave me the vibes of some of the not best that I've read. There's a little bit of an immaturity to it, as far as I'm concerned. A lack of subtlety, a vocabulary that kind of feel like it comes from our world and like young people talk, and that's not cringe in itself, but in a setting that's like kind of medieval-ish, not really medieval, but like in the past and with dragons and fantasy, it does read as a little cringe, and it doesn't really read like as it's on purpose. Like, the characters call each other badasses all the time because, you know, that's the best way always to communicate that your character is a badass, is to have another character say it, as we all know. There were also just like the expression blah 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 for the win, or even Violet referring to her love interest Zayden and calling him like scorching hot. Which I read this and I was just like, oh, no. So yeah, not my thing. I can see why someone younger would appreciate it. Especially if you're not too difficult with lore and world building and having a world that makes sense. Because as far as I was concerned, the world makes so little sense. Even though I really don't consider myself that difficult when it comes to that. If you have good characters, I'll just be along for the ride and I'm not gonna ask myself too many questions. But in the case of Fourth Wing, there were a few times where I was just like, wait, why are they doing that? How does that work? Wait, that makes no sense. Like, I'm sorry, the whole concept is that Violet joins this war college that teaches her how to become a dragon rider, and they're basically training to become soldiers in a country that is at war, and the school encourages students, so will-be soldiers, to kill each other, which is ridiculous. And it's just like, basically it feels like we wanted to write Harry Potter meets the Hunger Games or whatever, just like magic school, dragons, death trials. So a bit like, what tropes do I want to write about? And then instead of going to the next step, which is, and how do I make it make sense? We just stop at what tropes do I want to write about. Because, yeah, if you're a country at war, why do you encourage your students to kill each other and have them complete death trials to make sure that you have as little available soldiers on the battlefield as possible? Especially considering that the dragon riders have to pass a test, so they're already kind of the elite of society, and they are some kids that have trained all of their life to try and be worthy of becoming a dragon rider. As a society that is currently at war, why would you try to kill people who are showing this level of devotion and loyalty to your cause? Yeah, no, I don't get it. And there are a lot of things like this where it's just like, wait, why is it working like this? That makes absolutely no sense. And yeah, the problem is that it just keeps taking you out of the story at the end of the day. But yeah, again, I will eventually release a video specifically about Fourth Wing and probably about Iron Flame and Onyx Storm. At least that's the plan. I'm still gonna finish because it wasn't as bad that I wanted to DNF it. And I'm really curious to see how it goes, especially because my friend told me that it just goes downhill from there. And I'm just like, is this like a limbo? How low can you go? Are we trying to see how low the bar can get? Again, I'm kind of mean. I wouldn't say it's the worst book I've read. It's just overhyped. But yeah, I don't know, 16, 17-year-old me would probably have loved it, so I get it. Anyway, next book. The Spellshop by Sarah Beth Durst. So that is a cozy fantasy book about some librarian whose library is attacked by the revolution, and so she decides to flee with her assistant, who is a living plant, and together they flee to her childhood home that is somewhere on an island far at sea. And so she goes there and shenanigans happen. And that is one that I'm reading with my sister, my mother, and my aunt, to have a little bit of a book club, the four of us, which is always quite interesting because my sister and I are mostly into fantasy, adventure, and things like this. My aunt is happy to read pretty much anything, but my mom is a delicate little flower, and you have to find something that will not scare her in the slightest, and she finds Lord of the Ring, the movies, very scary. So I let you imagine how easy it is to find books that we all enjoy. And last time we had a book club together, we ended up reading Legends and Lattes that we all really enjoyed. So I was hyped for the Spellshop because, oh yeah, once the main character arrives on this island, she opens a Spellshop, hence the title. And so I don't know, I just liked the idea of character opening a spell shop. I think that can be really cute. I think that can be really entertaining. So I thought I would have a good time with this book, but honestly, I almost didn't finish it. There were a few times where I almost DNF'd it, and if I had been reading it on my own, I probably would have, to be honest. I just finished it because I wanted to be able to have the conversation with my mom, my aunt, and my sister. So I really forced myself to finish it, but honestly, I found it kind of boring. I can't really explain why I had no problem in Legends and Lattes just reading about Thimble making biscuits and Viv making coffee and lattes and stuff like that, or talking about ovens. Like every time they were talking about ovens, I was very invested because, you know, Thimble needs his ovens. And in this book, though, when they were trying to have these little cute conversation about developing the shop and developing her house and everything, I couldn't have cared less. Like I did not care. Like, there is one moment where Keela, the main character, and her plant assistant, Cal, were talking about how to organize her garden, and it lasted, maybe I'm exaggerating, but I felt like it lasted a whole page of them organizing the garden, and it was just not really interesting. So yeah, I don't know if it was just the style or the characters or I don't know what it was that just didn't get me into it, but I was not invested in the slightest. I think it could be the writing, because I felt like the writing was it was not bad. There were a few moments where I thought it was pretty good, but I just don't think it was enough to really get me sucked in into these mundane description of things. I also wasn't the biggest fan of the characters because they were just all quirky in a very aggressive way. Like, they were all just kind of going on tangent all the time instead of just getting straight to the point. And it was on purpose, I think. It was just a way of really making them feel quirky. But for me, it was just a little bit too much. Like, when the characters were just talking about one thing and then losing the plot completely to talk about a specific anecdote that happened 5 years ago that has nothing to do with the story, just to be like, tee hee hee, quirky. That really didn't do it for me. And so yeah, you have a very long moment at the beginning of the book where nothing happens, basically. It's just her setting her shop, and it's not really, again, that interesting to me, even though Legends and Latte is exactly the same. And yet for some reason in Legends and Latte, I absolutely loved it. And I wanted nothing more from the book. But in the Spellshop, I just wasn't into it. But then at the end, you just keep having all the plot happen at the same time, and it just never stops. I'm not gonna spoil, but basically you have like one event that happens, and then another, and then that gets solved super easily, and then another happens that gets also solved super easily, and then another one that also gets solved too easily. And so you have this chain of events where it feels heavy for about a second, and then you realize that either it's going to be solved super easily, or it was actually never a problem in the first place. And I was just begging for mercy at the end. I was just like, no, I can't, please stop. And it's not even focused on the main character. It's just about this one random chick who just arrives 70% into the book, and suddenly the whole climax is around that one character, and the main character is just like kind of working around her. It was just so weird. So yeah, not for me, but that doesn't mean that it's bad, because my aunt and my mother both really appreciated it. And especially for my mother, who is someone who likes to not be stressed when she reads books, she appreciated the fact that it was a bit of a lighter story that she could enjoy without being scared of life. But it still had like this revolution in the background with ideas of censorship and propaganda, because that is kind of a theme of the book, that, yeah, when you have a tyrant in the power, they will censor books, but, you know, let's not go into that. Anyway, yeah, it was just not for me. Another book that I've read, and that was very much for me, was When Among Crows by Veronica Roth. Honestly, look at this little beauty. Yeah, this one was really much my vibe. It's about this guy called Dimitro who's looking for a flower that seems to have magical powers. And, well, it's not so much about that as the rest of his journey afterwards, because he finds the flower super early in the book, and then he just kind of goes on a journey to find Baba Yaga. And he meets some friends along the way, but his friends are kind of monsters. And all the creatures in the book belong to the Slavic folklore, which I actually really appreciated, because it's not often that I read books like this, so I thought it was really nice and refreshing. So we basically follow Dimitro while he's trying to find Baba Yaga and meeting different creatures, some of whom will eventually join him on his quest. There is a Zmora, which is a monster that eats fear, and a Striga, which is a creature that eats, I think it was anger or something. Meanwhile, there is also an Older, which I think was called the holy order that lurks in the background and tries to hunt down these creatures. And it's all quite mysterious what Dimitra really wants to find Baba Yaga for. And what I really liked, other than the adventure and the pace and the characters, was the relationship between the three main characters, because you really do have this connection that grows between them. Like, they learn to trust each other, to appreciate each other. But when I say trust, it's like, you know, trust. There is some appreciation for each other. They do trust each other to a certain extent, but they also know that they don't know each other that well, and that there are some things that they don't really tell each other, if that makes sense. So it's really these tentative friendships and more than friendships that are building along the journey, and I just really appreciated it. Because usually I read a book for characters and characters' dynamics and stuff like this, and for me in this book, it was just really there. Also, I do love a book about monster hunters and monsters. So yeah, it was just my vibe. Honestly, strong recommend from me on that one. And I will absolutely check out the second one when it comes out. Next book. Next book is Evocation by S.T. Gibson, which I really liked as well. This one is a romantasy, fantasy romance, whichever one you prefer to use. And it's focused around a man called David, who seems to have been cursed, and he is trying to find a remedy for himself before he probably dies from it and loses his soul from this curse. And for that, he is trying to get his ex-boyfriend Riss to help him. Because they are both really good in the occult, and Riss is more focused on demon summoning, which is basically kind of what David needs to save himself in this situation. But due to a lot of shenanigans that happened in the past, Riss is a little bit reluctant to help him. And the best way to approach Riss to get his help in the situation is through his wife, Moira. And so the story is basically these three unlikely allies trying to find a remedy for David's situation, and the clock is ticking. And yeah, I love the book. Another beauty, I would say. So yeah, that one, I just completely devoured it as well. I felt like it was a very easy read, and truth be told, it was also a moment where I just needed the reading break like nothing else, so I think I read it in 2 evenings. It had been a while since I had read a book that made me read until 3 in the morning. Because I do love my sleep. I really try my best not to go to bed too late. I fail most of the time, but 3 in the morning is still an achievement. And this book did it. Like I said, I probably needed the reading cure at this point. But still, this book delivered it, and I am grateful for it. I really just love the relationship between the 3 main characters, because it's just my thing. I love complicated relationships that are a bit tense, but you can tell that there's a lot of care as well between the characters, like all of those tangled webs of emotions and stuff. Like, yeah, I just love it. So yeah, good recommend from me. It was pretty fun. It was very entertaining. Kind of a simple story, but I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And since we're on the topic of Evocation, I'm just gonna mention its prequel straight away, Odd Spirits, which is basically the shenanigans that I mentioned before as the reason why Riss and David and Moira are not cool with each other. I mean, Riss and Moira are cool with each other. It's with David that they both have a problem. And this book kind of explains why. So yes, that book is centered around Rhys and Moira and what happened to make them so pissed at David. And I mean, I liked it. It was a pretty good read. Very quick as well, again. Especially because the format is just shorter. It's a novella. It was interesting to see the part of the story that was only mentioned in Evocation. So I enjoyed that part of it. The only thing that I was a bit unhappy with is that I felt really much on David's side, which I'm not super surprised because he was my favorite character out of the three, even though I loved the three a lot, but I just like David a little bit more. So I was not surprised to be biased for him, but honestly I felt like the author was biased for him as well. Because thinking about it, I didn't really see why Moira and Rhys were so pissed off with him. Because I'm no spoilers, but he was right. He was 100% right. I guess he was rude while being right, but he was still right. So yeah, I don't know. I wish the blames would have been split a bit more across both groups. It wasn't. It was still fine, and I still enjoyed the book. Next, Rules for Ghosting by Shelly J. Shaw. This one is specific. It's one that I read with my sister and a friend for our small book club, where we pick a book every other month to read together and then have a talk together, blah blah blah. You know how book clubs work. This one was a disappointment for marketing reasons. Like, it's called The Rules for Ghosting. The cover has a very haunted house kind of atmosphere. The summary kind of sells you on this weird love story around, oh god, what is his name? Ezra is his name. A trans man called Ezra who moves in with new flatmates, and the man who lives below his flat is a widower, and they kind of fall in love, but Ezra can see ghosts, and so he starts seeing the ghost of his love interest, Jonathan's husband. Late husband. So basically Jonathan's husband Ben died, and now Jonathan and Ezra are trying to have a relationship together, but Ezra can see Ben's ghost. So that sounded pretty intriguing, but it's not a lie, but let's just say that what I thought would be 60% ghost story, 30% romance, and 10% family drama turned out to be 60% family drama, 30% romance, and 10% ghost story. So it just wasn't for me. I don't care about family drama, or rather I care, but if it's like a side plot, I wasn't interested. It was just so poorly marketed. I don't understand what the goal was here. I mean, I do, it's to make people read, but you're not really doing anyone a service by lying about the content of a book, because a lot of people are just not going to appreciate it, and then the people who would appreciate it are not going to read it. Because if you're looking for a family drama with a little bit of a supernatural twist, you're not necessarily going to grab a book that sells you a love story with a lot of paranormal elements. And if a paranormal story with a nice romance on the side is what you want to read, you're not going to be sucked into the family drama. So yeah, I can imagine that a lot of people would love this book because it was well written, it was interesting, it had really good representation, which was a part of it that I really appreciated. It was not perfect, obviously. I really didn't think the whole roommate, flatmates thing was that interesting. I felt there were too many of them and they were taking too much attention from the rest of the story already. I just really thought that the flatmates' importance should have been reduced because they were kind of pointless. I did really like the trio. Like, I thought Ezra was a really cool character. I thought Jonathan was too good for this world, and Ben was really cool as a character as well. And I found, when reading the summary, I found that it was an interesting concept to be haunted by the dead ex-husband of your boyfriend. And the dynamic was really cool. Like, Jonathan and Ezra had a good dynamic. Ben looked really fun as a character, and his interaction with Ezra were also pretty interesting. So whenever the book was focusing on them, I was like, oh wow, actually that could have been interesting. But then there's a whole family drama with Ezra's family being in shambles because at a family dinner, his mother admits that she's been cheating on his father for years with another woman. And so now Ezra and his brother and his sister are just like completely taken aback, and the father is also just completely shattered, which makes sense. And there's also their father is like, he owns a Jewish funeral home. And so there's a lot of drama around that and around money and business and stuff like that. And so, yeah, the story is really just about this family needing to reconnect and stop being toxic or something. And it was mostly around that. And it's not that it's not interesting, but it's just not what I want to read. Like, I'm sure it's interesting for some people, just really not to me. So, yeah, just a terrible case of bad marketing, but unfortunately I can't give it a good rating because I did not appreciate it. So I can't in all good faith give it a better grade than I ended up giving it. But it wasn't because it was bad, it was just because I shouldn't have read it. Yeah, somebody in the marketing department just did a very bad job. But anyway, next books. And I say books because I'm just gonna put them together. Because it's basically the first two books of the Raven Cycle by Maggie Stiefvater. I have no idea how you pronounce it. But yeah, I read The Raven Boys and The Dream's Thief. And I really liked them. I thought they were really cool books. The story basically revolves around a group of kids who attend a rich all-boys school. And they meet a girl called Blue, who is the daughter of a psychic. And she's part of a family of psychic, and she's the only one who's not a psychic, but she's like an amplifier for psychics, so she makes her family's power stronger. And the group of boys are looking for the grave of an old Welsh king that was apparently buried somewhere in the US for some reason. And yeah, I had a really good time reading them, actually, both books. There were some times where I felt like it was a bit longish, and I'm not necessarily the most invested in the plot itself, which is why I was struggling a little bit to recollect things. Because the thing that I really truly enjoyed about those books were the characters and their dynamics. I really think that the characters' dynamics were some of the best that I've read in a while. At least to me, because once again, I do love complicated dynamics, relationships between characters who really deeply care for each other, but have like things in the way that makes their relationship complicated. And the characters in this book are exactly like that. There is so much love and care between those characters, but there's also a lot of anger and resentment for good reasons that are well justified. And so for all the moments of them saying really harsh words to each other, you also have a lot of moments where they show just how deeply they care for each other and how they're there for each other. And that's just something I really love because it's such a delicate balance to portray. And you show characters who like can hurt each other, but then in the same breath say something so super nice and sweet. And, you know, it just feels very moving at the end of the day. I really felt like those books have a bit of a melancholy to them almost. And that's probably why the pace of the books are a bit slow at times, which I think just really participate to the overall atmosphere. So yeah, I really enjoyed it. You can tell by me having purchased physical copy of them, they're just hiding somewhere here. And no, I will not take them out because I will ruin everything. And I think that's it for the books I've read in May. It was overall a pretty good month. I read a lot of books that I really, really enjoyed. A few that I didn't like much, but it's impossible to like everything you read, right? I wish I could. But yeah, that's it for my reads of the month of May, so let's see what June has in store for us. Click the like button if you've enjoyed the video, subscribe if you want to see more of my face. Thanks for tuning in, and continue to enjoy stories.